But eventually it began to be used in this way. So let's bring ourselves up to 2006 and the article by Roland Griffiths, which is titled "Psilocybin Can Occasion Mystical Type Experiences Having Substantial and Sustained Personal Meaning and Spiritual Significance." Griffith's study, which this paper is based on, was quite rigorous, apparently. 36 volunteers, none of whom had ever taken a hallucinogen, received a pill that was either psilocybin or a placebo. And when administered under supportive conditions, psilocybin occasioned experiences similar to spontaneously occurring mystical experiences. 2/3 of the patients rated the psilocybin session among the top 5 most spiritually significant experiences of their lives, and 1/3 ranked it at the top. And 14 months later, these ratings had only slipped very slightly. Furthermore, the completeness of the mystical experience closely tracked the improvements reported in personal well-being, life satisfaction, and behavior change. The authors determined the completeness of a mystical experience using 2 questionnaires, including the Plunka-Richards Mystical Experience Questionnaire, based on William James's The Varieties of Religious Experience. Of course, we talk about that book quite a bit on this show. The questionnaire measures feelings of unity, sacredness, ineffability, peace, and joy, as well as the impression of having transcended space and time, and the noetic sense that the experience has disclosed objective truth about reality. A complete mystical experience is one that exhibits all 6 of these characteristics. And Griffiths believes that the long-term effectiveness of the drug is due to its ability to occasion such a transformative experience, but not by changing the brain's long-term chemistry, as drugs like Prozac might do, but by changing your mind. So this paper has been met with quite a lot of enthusiasm by mainstream science, which is very interesting. But where it differs, well, let's just get to this in a minute. And certainly it's a groundbreaking paper, which is sort of what they call field expanding our awareness of or scientists' awareness. I mean, we're talking about scientists here. Most of us who have an interest in mystical or spiritual things already understand, but the idea that science can now sort of at least get on board with it is really exciting, I think. But the journals have been talking about that when used appropriately, these psychedelic compounds can produce remarkable, possibly beneficial effects that certainly deserve further study. But and here's where the interesting thing really arises, is that this paper and how it came to be sheds an interesting light on the fraught and often contentious relationship between science and that other realm of human inquiry that science has historically disdained and generally wants nothing to do with, spirituality. For in designing the first modern study of psilocybin, Griffiths had decided to focus not on potential therapeutic applications of the drug. This is the path that other researchers had taken, but rather on the spiritual effects of this experience on so-called healthy normal. So rather than just focusing on what it can do for people who have illnesses, it focuses on what it can do for the ordinary person. And from a scientific perspective, well, what good is that? They don't really care about that. But Griffiths did, and Griffiths' paper shows that the quest for experiences that free oneself of the bounds of everyday perception and thought in a search for universal truths and enlightenment is an abiding element of our humanity that has nevertheless enjoyed little credibility in the mainstream scientific world. The time has come to recognize these extraordinary subjective experiences, even if they sometimes involve claims that about ultimate realities that lie outside the purview of science. And so it's through this work that we are maybe beginning to at least have scientists think about what spirituality means. Griffiths himself, after going through training in Siddha Yoga, he began to try meditation. And he says that in 1994, something opened up for me, and he started meditating regularly and going on retreats and working his way through a variety of Eastern spiritual traditions, and found himself drawn deeper and deeper into the mystery. And he modestly describes a funny kind of awakening, a mystical experience. I was surprised. He was reluctant to say, much of what had happened to him, but something way, way beyond the material worldview that I can't really talk to my colleagues about because it involves metaphors or assumptions that as a scientist I'm really uncomfortable about. So this man, Mr. Griffiths, is having this battle between his scientist self and his spiritual self, and I think it reflects the battle that is going on between science and spirituality, and perhaps it's a battle we are all going through within ourselves. The trick, to me, the key here is remembering. And remembering that these two parts of ourselves, our didactic mind, if you will, and our spiritual nature, are not mutually exclusive. One doesn't have to dominate the other. But we do live in a time when that aspect of ourselves, the didactic aspect of ourselves, the empiricists in our nature, tends to want to squash out our spiritual nature, or our intuitive nature, if you want to call it that, or our creative consciousness. And by trying to do that, trying to squelch that, you certainly create a situation where there can be, illness, there can be dissatisfaction, there can be mental and emotional unhappiness. Finding the balance, that's the key. It's fascinating stuff, which we will certainly talk more about in later shows to come. So, until next week, stay calm, stay conscious,